Hello,
Hooray.
everyone. We're going to intro the show at the start of the show because we have things about the show to explain. I know, we're really falling apart here. Hi, welcome to Play, Watch, Listen.
Show.
Yeah, I mean, anything but Play, Watch, Listen. I'm Alanah Pearce. That's Austin Wintry. That's Mike Bithell. We skipped last week because lives made... Oh, you can see my knee. Look at that nice scar I have. See that?
Oh.
It's really weird. I have this big white scar like you normally would, and then this just big red dot that
Big
is...
freckle.
I mean, it's really strange. It looks like rubber, and it feels... I don't know.
How old
I
is
feel
it? It's from the accident.
It's
right?
3 months now. So just that,
Yeah,
I don't think that's going anywhere.
I had one like that for ages, and then very slowly it went to white. But,
It's a really weird... Yeah, it's a really weird texture, and it's also strange because the part where I have the lump on my knee is like here. So this part hurts. Scars all the way back here. So I feel like what happened is this hit the road first. This scraped it. So, you know, just that's an update on my knee. Anyway, we didn't have an episode last week because people's lives happen, and Troy is not here this week because he hates us, I believe is the verdict.
He said some pretty hurtful things.
Yeah, he's...
I guess not doing it last week was the straw that broke the camel's back for him.
It definitely
felt
felt like
neglected.
he'd been building up some stuff. Yeah, no, it's cool.
Because we didn't give him an hour of praise, as the reviews would say. He was
That's
upset and has boycotted this week's episode of the show.
Let's only
not coming
talk
back.
about
Troy.
The Last of Us and
Can we
Second
go?
Son.
Let's make our top 5 list of Troy's best performances and have that be the episode.
I know 5. I feel immediately
Brutal.
terrible. I would make that joke with him in the room. I feel terrible for doing it without him.
I love
Yeah,
it.
but
I
I don't feel like
I'm gonna have to DM him a confession. That I
But
made
he's
that joke on the
wonderful.
show.
Like
That's the
he's so
Yeah.
good at what he does that I feel like no one's gonna be like, does Mike Bithell
that's
think Troy's
interesting.
bad?
So your argument would be that Troy has achieved a level of quality in his work that it is unbelievable to imagine a criticism being true. Therefore,
Correct.
I like
Anyone
that. That's
saying he
interesting.
doesn't have 5 good performances is joking.
Is clearly wrong.
Yes, objectively false. Here
I'll
we
just
are.
go with.
No, that's
I'll just,
objectivity. We have achieved objectivity.
Finally,
in the
it's
games industry.
in
Correct.
Troy Baker.
and it's not been long. Like we're barely started, and that's
3 minutes.
achieved.
Yeah.
I know the one thing that he would be so distraught to hear me say, but I don't even need 5. It's just Kai Lang from Mass Effect 3, and I don't care about any other performance he's ever given.
That's totally fair. Yeah. I
Yep,
was gonna
done.
say
The list is done.
I forgot Kai Lang. That's
There was an episode we had not that long ago where I was like,
Troy's very
anyway,
opinionated about that character.
it was like,
Sorry,
I gotta go
continue.
play the crew. And so I disappeared to go play the crew. And then it was just Troy again. Like I had left the podcast being like, gotta go play this game for Funhouse. And then it's just Troy. And I was like, what? Motherfucker. It's not an exaggeration. He really is in everything.
It's too many. It's silly.
That's my main complaint about Troy. But the truth is actually not any of the things that we've said. He's just working. So we thought we'd come clean before the conspiracy theories grow hot.
I feel like you should cut that so that we just leave it as this mysterious, like, we think they're kidding.
Unsaid.
He probably wasn't mad at them, but he is definitely not there.
Yeah,
I don't
you
know
can't
that I
argue with
want to
those
do
facts,
that to
can you?
Troy.
I've got a better idea.
Okay.
For the final edit, can you go like look for like B-roll of him like on a red carpet or something and just have it running as the 4th box the whole time, muted, but just so that he's just sort of there and
if I can
gesturing to nobody.
I'll add a third Zoom person, and it's just a pic. I could probably make that happen.
I'm
right
gonna
now.
add an old favorite. Right
Or
now.
just
Let's do
loop,
this.
like there must be footage of him kind of nodding to someone's point from an old episode of this that we can just eternally loop. Oh, there you
loop.
go, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah,
hang
just
on.
have the loop of him just silently agreeing along and going, mm-hmm.
This is really out of date, this image. He has definitely changed his setup since then. I need to wait for him to leave
He's
the room
changed
again
it so
I can get an
much
update.
since then. I love that we really are
Yeah.
just actually still talking about Troy this whole time that he's not here. It's exactly as he would have wanted.
It is exactly as he would have wanted.
But I did come prepared with a topic today.
Is it Tig Notaro? That's what I want to talk about.
It is
about.
Isn't that
Austin.
amazing?
No, I did consider that maybe we could talk about, because this is what the games industry is blowing up about this week, is like what's defined as a developer. But we spoke about that like 2 weeks ago and we've got it covered. It everybody.
Yeah, we're done.
It everybody.
I think
A
everyone's
programmer is a
developer. That's my
programmer.
new theory. I don't think
good.
there's such a thing as a developer. No one has ever provably developed a video game.
That's
So
interesting. You're onto something. I like it.
That's my
I'm
position.
trying to join this call as Troy right now and see if I can make it work. It's too complicated just for a small bit. But no, so the question that I
The
wanted to
best
ask
small
you
bits
guys,
are the complicated ones, though.
that
Alanah, sorry.
nobody appreciates at all, was...
I did.
No,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Make it happen.
I was. Well, one
Even
time
with only three,
I know.
I love it.
We talked about this whole RQA developers blah blah blah. I fully am on board with not spinning our wheels too much on that because it's sort of silly. But one time we did glance at the topic of QA. That we never, and there was a thing that I kind of have had in the back of my mind for probably months. I don't remember when this came up, but it was ages ago. On the inherent subjectivity of QA and how like the judgment calls needed in what they do, which I think actually really bolsters. Incidentally, it bolsters the argument that they are very much part of the team, because the notion of how you decide what are bugs and then also what you reject as like, well, we can live with that, or there's not time for that. And like, there's so much to that process that even just in my capacity, I've borne witness to, that I thought there's actually lots to unpack on the whole QA front. If you wanted to go there, that was my thought.
We can. I'm cool with talking about QA. I know a lot of people who actually started out in games in QA. I don't know, directors, like a lot of people start in QA. I think we've spoken about a lot of really terrible QA working conditions. I know EA at one point had a leaderboard for who had worked the most hours. Literally like a strive to work the most hours leaderboard, for their QA department, which is awful. And the thing that I mentioned this in a video recently that I find the most fascinating about QA is people sometimes will be like, did QA not do their jobs? Did they not test this game? And there are two parts to that. Obviously, it's about prioritizing which bugs you want to fix. Surely QA found most of them. But also, a thing that is just very cool to think about is it would be impossible for any studio to hire an amount of QA people that could equal even the first day's release of playtime. So, like, even if you're
Hopefully.
QA testing for months,
Even if it's modestly successful, even if it's like underperforming,
you could QA test for 2 years and still day one have more hours played in a game, more people play testing than you could ever possibly do throughout the entire course.
This is why I ensure that only 200 people in the whole world want to play one of my games. It is
you heard it here first, folks. Don't wish list.
Don't buy my games, people.
But
a
it's scary to
customer
think
is
about.
just someone who hasn't found a bug yet. Yeah.
Well, I guess, Mike, do you want to talk about the QA process for your games or in general? Like, when do you start?
Sure. So it varies. And different studios, QA is definitely something that does vary so much. So I can only really speak to mine. I'm a big believer that like the best way to start QA is just to kind of not make bugs, which is a very easy thing to say, but you can do some things that help with that. So we do a lot of kind of processes with making the games to make sure that the game's always stable. A lot of games teams will make a game in a way that's like basically hanging by a thread and then send it to the QA team. And we try to keep our builds relatively solid. So the QA team has to work to find bugs in it. That's generally our approach. It doesn't mean it's bug free. It just means that we try and maintain that, and similar with optimization, I'm a big believer that you can't really know if a game's fun if it's tripping over itself when you're trying to play it. If the frame rate's rubbish, I can't enjoy a game which is running at 10 FPS. So therefore, we have to make sure we maintain kind of those kind of standards.
Do you think that's easier with a smaller team?
Hell yeah, and definitely easier with a small team, easier with visually less ambitious games, right? Like if I was making a AAA open world game, those games often the performance of those games really only comes in right at the end. And fair enough. And I'm fortunate in that the kinds of games we make, of course, we can get there. So I'm definitely not like lording it over a team who's making a bigger game. Our QA process tends to be dependent on the scale of the game. We have a really great QA person we've worked with on a couple of games called Julia, who's done a couple of different things for us, and she is just a one-person QA nightmare. You put her on code and she will break it elegantly, specifically find the issue. She is a commando. You just drop her into a game and she'll find all the problems. So she does our smaller stuff. So Solitaire Conspiracy was her. The Circular games are her. She's working on some upcoming stuff from us as well. When we go to a bigger project, which, as you'd expect, like more complexity breeds more bugs, we'll work with external kind of testing teams, which is, usually 4 or 5 kind of people would probably be working on a mid-level indie game for us. And then the other thing, of course, which I think a lot of the audience don't understand necessarily, is that you have different species of QA team. Basically, you have QA, you have functional QA, you have platform QA. So they're the people who are meant to make sure that like there aren't any kind of specific issues. They're quality control on behalf of the hardware manufacturers. So Xbox wants to make sure that a game doesn't have an Xbox specific problem. They're going to run you through all of that stuff. That stuff's interesting because some of it can be waived, some of it can't be waived, some of it's NDA, some of it's not. So you can kind of, there's some weird problems there. But that's what that is. And then things like lock QA, so where you do your localization, localization can break a game in a million ways. So you have a specific QA team who are people from each of the individual countries, native speakers in each of the languages who are testing your game. So it's often a very spread out process where like you might have, even on an indie game, you might have kind of 10 to 15 people who are professionally trying to break the game basically before it comes out. On a AAA game, obviously those numbers, through the roof.
This is a thing that I had never really even thought about before, but you mentioned working with someone who is like good at QA. For whatever reason in my head, of course that's true, but I've always been like, oh, QA is a thing that, you walk in and they teach you to do, and then everyone does it the same. But it's true that people could be really good at QA. That could be like a thing someone could be an expert in doing professionally. I'd never even considered that before.
Yeah, on lots of levels. So first of all, like QA requires, and that's why I always get frustrated, because I think I think this is true even in industry. I think a lot of people fall into this trap if you're not directly interacting with QA a lot. People see it as a starter job because, as you said, for a lot of people, it is a starter job. You go there, you want to be a designer in the games industry, you do a QA job, you get into the design track, and you're off. But there are career QA. Yeah, there are career QA professionals, and there you have, like with any profession, you have there's an enormous amount of like institutional knowledge, and even game designers have this knowledge to a tiny extent, but like a QA professional will know the kinds of things one does in a game to try and break it. Even players who've played a lot of games will have a sense of like, usually if I do this kind of thing, I'll break a game. QA, obviously an expert can take that, and you can sit down a QA person with a released game, and in 2 minutes they'll have figured out a way to fall through the floor because they know all the tricks of the trade. That's part of it. That's kind of an institutional awareness, but it's also about how you process information. So how you try and work your way through a project, how you logically kind of make sure you've kind of tried every bit of the floor, and those kind of like methodical thinking processes. And then crucially, the biggest part of QA is communication, which is I found this problem. Because in professional QA, you don't just say, I found a bug, here's a screenshot. There's like a process. You have to explain exactly how you got there, it's called a repo. So what did you do? What's the reproducible steps that get you to that bug? And I think all of us, as people in the games industry have done QA and put together an email for someone like that. But when you compare the kind of crappy email anyone on this call would send, myself included, to what like a professional will like, it's a menu. It's a beautiful kind of work of art. That will find this very specific thing in a reproducible manner. Because with bugs, you have rare bugs, which are a nightmare, where it's like 1 in 100 times this happens. The real talent of a QA person is going, that's not chance, because there's no such thing as chance on a computer. What is the exact steps you have to repeat in order to get that 100% of the time? And then once you've got 100% of the time, it's easy for the coder or designer who's going to fix the bug to be able to find it in the first place, and B, we're going to know when we fixed it, because if we can reproduce 100% of the time when we fix it, we know it's not on faith. We're not just getting lucky that we've not seen it again. So there's this enormous amount of skill. I think, like a lot of things, because bugs are something that players encounter directly themselves, they don't necessarily think about like the steps you need to take to professionalize that process and give information. And anyone watching this who's ever found a bug in a game they want to tell a developer about, find the reproduction steps. It will multiply the chances of that bug getting fixed by like 100. If you can find me the exact thing that will break it every single time, I will be able to solve that problem for you.
Yeah, I've spoken to people who work in QA about players finding a bug and reporting it, but often having no repo because they don't know how to do that.
Sure.
So a lot of those bug reports are effectively useless is not the right word. That would be selling it short, but like essentially just create a lot of work. So when you report the bug, someone has to look at it and be like, okay, I have to figure out how to recreate this. And that can take hours and hours and hours. And it seems like something that like should be very simple. Be like, this person found this bug at this place, go in the code and update it and hit enter. And then we fixed the bug. Yeah. Erase bug from code. But no, even figuring out how that bug got there for that one person, it's really complicated. I remember with Assassin's Creed Unity, some graphics cards having that visual issue where you would just see their eyeballs. Everyone's faces were morphed off, but the percentage of players who had that was so small in the grand scheme of things because it was only related to one piece of hardware that apparently recreating that bug actually took them a really long time to figure out because people weren't reporting their hardware when reporting the bug. So it's like, we have no idea what's causing this. It could be a million things. How do we figure that out? It's a lot of puzzle solving that goes into QA top to bottom, I think.
I think the open world games also basically multiple orders of magnitude more difficult to reproduce these bugs because there's so many variables that are because I see this even in the narrow scope of the music. Part of the way I tend to do my job is once the score is fully delivered, but even concurrently while we're working, I'll go in and I'll play the game and I'll try to break the music system because I'm the one who can clock a bug more easily than anyone else. Yeah. Exactly. Like there are plenty of times where people will message me and go, hey, I heard this thing and then I heard this thing and I wasn't sure if it was intentional or not. So I don't even know if it's a bug because like this cue, this big French horn suddenly interrupting this thing was kind of cool, but it also was kind of strange. Like, so I don't really know were you doing that on purpose and what? And of course it's always disheartening when you're like, yeah, no, that was on purpose. But
that's composition I spent all night working on. Yeah,
certainly had that happen. But yeah, sometimes I'll get bugs assigned to me. It kind of just to see if I can pitch in. I'll get a little notification in my email saying, hey, can you check out this bug that we found in the music implementation? And I'll never be able to reproduce it. On an open world game like Assassin's Creed or The Pathless or something, it's damn near impossible without just committing to like a 5-hour playtest in order to go to that one moment in the hopes of reproducing all the exact steps. Because as soon as these systems start talking to each other,
because it could even be something that happens an hour before that one moment. It's the beginning of the trigger of the bug eventually happening.
Yeah.
Exactly. Would there be separate people who do work to QA test music? I had not thought about that, but I guess that is also an important thing.
I think there is audio QA. Because you will see QA reports that say things like, obviously things like dialogue, like it triggered the wrong dialogue when I walked into this room or blah, blah, blah. Like theoretically a gameplay, a sort of like, whatever the term would be, but a generic QA person that's just looking for anything wrong with the game would be able to spot something like that. But I have heard of audio specific people or things that are like, lip sync malfunctions, all those kinds of things. But I do get pushback. Funny enough, there's a movie equivalent to this process as well. That's part of the movie distribution.
You know of a movie equivalent?
I know, right? Because I've gotten pushback. I've gotten flagged before on movies that I scored. There was one movie in particular a long time ago where there's a scene where it's this amazing film. It's a Jordanian film where there's this old man in the neighborhood who has discovered that one of the young boys in the neighborhood is being really kind of badly abused by his father. So he decides to, intervene. And so the boy has been ushered off away from home for the night and he's going to confront the father. So there's just this scene where he's in the guy's house, just pouring himself a glass of water, just waiting for the guy to come in the front door, knowing like this guy is going to flip the fuck out when he realizes I've essentially taken his son away and said, you need help. You are a destructive monster. And so there's this shot of him where we're just slowly pushing in on him, and then we reverse and we're slowly pushing in on the doorknob. And the director decided, let's go all the way to literal digital 0. There's not even room tone. It's just complete and total silence. And every time I sat in screenings of this movie many, many times. It played in festivals and stuff all over the world. And there was this year-long period where we kept watching it over and over and over with new audiences. And it was always, that moment was so intense because no one dared breathe in the whole theater because it was such this culminating. But of course, when the film was getting released theatrically and on DVD and all that, there was like the movie equivalent of QA. I think it's called QC, quality control. It's the same idea, where there's people that are watching
I don't
it.
think you'd be able to release that on a console or on a couple of the consoles as a game. Absolute silence would actually be a flag on some of the console
Exactly.
TRC process. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, they pinged it as, we think that you have a bug, your room tone disappeared and whatever, and we had to kind of do the waiver process of saying, no, that's on purpose. And it's almost like appealing a judge where you have to say, we promise that's artistic license and not a technical fault.
And you can't say, we promise to fix it in the day one patch, can you? So
there
you
is
don't have that luxury
they do
that
it
game
now.
devs have.
They
do with Cats, right? They did some stuff like that.
Yeah, Game of Thrones got rid of the coffee cup.
And Justice League did a day 3000 patch.
It still counts as a patch, yeah.
So yeah, it was a big. Actually, I guess it wasn't anywhere near 3000 days, but that'd be like 10 years.
Yeah, I'm upset that you didn't have the days accurate.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, what did you guys think? Have you guys seen Kong be Godzilla?
I watched
hours late to all of these things.
I watched that and Snyder Cut. I have opinions. Mike, did you see either
Simultaneously,
of them?
that seems like a heavy.
Turns out
way to
that's
watch
not a
movies.
good way to watch them.
No,
Who'd have thought?
it's loud. I
It's like
imagine. Loud.
I had exactly. It was like, I had no. That's just the only way you could be 0.01% predisposition towards like epilepsy, but if you watch both at the same time, it's guaranteed because it's just visual noise to the extreme.
One of them's got a lot of slow-mo. I feel like you could like maybe take some breaks in those periods of time. Really just have
I think you could also watch Kong twice during the runtime of Snyder Cut.
Well, we can talk about those things if you like. But my question, which is kind of related to the QA conversation, something that I think we've slightly spoken about before, especially considering the caliber of the games that the two of you have worked on, was for anyone...
Meaning what? Mediocre?
Terrible video games.
Is this a backhanded at both of us?
No, I meant like...
buggy trash. Yeah.
The word is nonsense, but indie or indie adjacent. How important do you think it is for indie devs or even, people who work in QA to have a presence on Twitter? Because it was just like, it occurred to me that last week with all this judgment, which for the record, I realized we never actually established, the conversation about what is a game dev and what isn't came because of a Forbes writer who I guess used to work in game dev tweeted something along the lines of, this is absolutely not what he said, but the start of it was essentially, if you aren't a programmer, you aren't a developer, you shouldn't call yourself a developer. He was talking about his Japanese friend. I don't know. But then I think the thing that mostly got the negative response was that he said people would only say that out of ego. So that, worked up a lot of Twitter, and a lot of people had opinions on if they're devs or not. And I've said this before. I do not care if someone would say that I am or am not a game developer, but I do have it in my social media bios for a very specific reason. It says game dev/writer is because upon announcing it, everyone assumed that I was marketing or PR. Not that those things aren't inherently game dev, but to most people, that is more specific if I just have writer or video game writer. I don't know if it's because of my background or because I'm a woman. They tend to just assume comms. So I have that very specifically to be like, I'm doing this part of the production of a video game, not that people who do those facets of it are not game
In
dev.
fairness, I feel like that's not a difficult mistake to make, to assume that you would be in the comms side of it, considering that would be a lot of the main points of contact that you would have been interfacing with, I would think, right? As a
Yeah, a lot of people go from being a journalist to going to
standard
comms.
move for a journalist to cross over in that way, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah, whereas what
it's
you
not
did
uncommon.
is far less like you made a huge shift.
It's actually...
It seems to me.
I mean, I know more people who've gone directly from being games journalists to being video game writers than games journalists to comms. But I know of people, but like of personal friends, more of them have gone directly to writing video games.
You're a bit snobbish,
It is definitely
right?
a thing that happens.
Gatekeeper alert.
It's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
Yes, that's me. I won't be friends with the comms people.
No.
No, that's ridiculous. One of my best friends is is comms at Sucker Punch. But yeah, I made that.
Are you
distinction
pulling
with
some of
intense.
my best friends work in comms?
I am, exactly. Some of my best friends work in comms. It's true. One of my friends just started
good
Ubisoft
for
in
you.
comms this week, okay? So I know lots of people in comms. It's not,
It's really cool of you to like be friends with comms people.
That's
It's
what I'm
like
saying.
really, it says a lot about you. Like it makes
we
you
hang
heroic.
out. I think I really understand what they do by virtue
You need
of
the
being
old-
friends
Yeah,
with
like
multiple others, so.
it's different. Like it's obviously not as.
That's all I'm
No,
saying.
of course, like
Did you ever watch Colbert Report back in the day when he had this running gag about like when he was playing a kind of Bill O'Reilly-esque character for that show, and so it was constant recurring motif of like the one black friend, and he had this one stock photo he would always use of him going next to this very uncomfortable looking guy that's like clearly never met him before.
Very good.
You need a comms person photo of you that you can recreate.
I have
that
plenty.
with.
Because I have so
Well,
many
then it
friends in
ruins
comms.
it. You need one.
Point being, regardless, yeah, I think it's probably because of how people know me, but I'm not going to tell you there wasn't some sexism in that, because there was so much of people being like, what on earth would she know about writing fiction? She should go work on a social media team. Like it was very specific language directed at this woman does not know what she is doing. That I feel like my male colleagues do not get. Sometimes people tell me I should just go straight to porn. So, some of that is rooted in sexism a little bit, I think. But
Straight
regardless,
to porn. I mean, in fairness,
is there an indirect route to porn through video game development?
Straight to it.
in fairness, the level, the bar for quality of narrative writing in porn is, you could stand to raise that bar.
And I'd probably enjoy it.
I feel like you would find
probably
ways
be
to
quite
really
fun.
inject some creativity. Yeah.
I know there are a lot of really specific rules about porn writing, especially in the US, where, if there's how we got here, welcome.
It's on me.
Welcome to the show, everyone.
If porn is advertised as being like, the step sibling or sibling thing, it must be established at a certain frequency throughout the narrative that they are not actually related. So you have to say a certain amount of times in like a full published video. I don't know how that applies for websites that just take chunks of videos or whatever. But it has to be said with enough frequency that they are not blood related. You have to write that into the script. So people are like, why are they talking? So they can get away with incest. But they have to repeatedly say they're not related.
Do they clumsily, so they're just, during the scenes, just clumsily thrown.
We're not related. I think it's
really.
It just has to be established.
This is fine, everyone. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
My favorite. There was years ago on.
I'm really worried about where this is going.
My favorite.
You should be terrified.
Your favorite what?
Years ago on CNBC, there was like this 2-hour special that they re-aired like 1,000 times of the economics of the porn industry and how it was like this, because this was probably 10 or 12 years ago. So it was kind of right when the internet was sort of putting the nail in the coffin on the sort of traditional, very profitable porn industry and shifting to the wildly, I think, unprofitable internet version. And so they were talking about how
surely porn's profitable.
Yeah, but I think it's nothing compared to like the heyday of the Girls Gone Wild VHS and shit like that.
It's Mike Bithell's podcast recommendation. There's a John Ronson. I'm going to have to look up what it is. There's a John Ronson podcast where he talks about the economics of like, basically, yeah. So yes, internet pornography it makes a lot of money, but only for the tech companies that host.
Right.
Rather than for the performers.
Oh yeah, performers get ripped off. It's like,
but they didn't used to. I think
it was ever thus, right? Like workers. I don't know if I've mentioned socialism on the show before. But yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, in any case, the thing that was
pro workers. That's my stance.
The thing that was so fascinating was that they realized there was this experiment that they engaged in. I never actually looked to see if this ended up working, but the thing that they spotlighted heavily in this documentary was that they filmed a full feature-length Pirates of the Caribbean parody porn film, but they specifically wrote it such that they could cut all the sex scenes and sell it as a kids movie in like Japan. Because it was
amazing.
Because it was basically just a cheap Pirates knockoff with bad actors.
Sure.
If you just got rid of all the
that
sex
would have been
scenes.
quite hard, actually.
I think it made it at the time the highest budget
the line
porn.
from the movie. The butterfly effect. The butterfly effect is the name of the podcast, by the way. If anyone wants to listen, it's really interesting. Like if you're an economics like nerd,
It's called the what?
It's fascinating. The Butterfly Effect.
Butterfly Effect.
It's John Ronson, who's an investigative journalist from
with Ashton
from
Kutcher
around
and
here,
Amy
actually.
Smart.
Say again.
With Ashton Kutcher and Amy Smart as guest hosts.
That's right. Yeah. He's amazing at the mixes. But yeah, no, it's really good. It's because that whole industry kind of fell apart, but in like a very interesting way.
What
were we talking about?
Pretty
before?
wild.
Pornography?
Yeah, we can circle back to the question, but I did
Developers.
want to. Yes, I did want to bring up Mia Khalifa, who I would say is a very famous ex porn star.
I know her from an episode of Kind of Funny. I think that's where I know her from.
She's a friend of mine. She's cool. But she went public about having only made 12,000. Did my webcam do the thing where it dropped me down for no reason?
You do look like you're sort of
creating
thinking.
choice. I was gonna respect.
I
your
don't
choice
understand why it does it, but anyway, she only made $12,000 during it was a pretty short amount of time that she was in. She actually even worked in the industry. And considering the
presumably,
millions,
like she was in a bunch of stuff. Like those guys work. Like
but it's also
they do a lot of films, right? Presumably.
Yeah, the stuff that she was in has millions of views. But it doesn't matter. And I know that, like, I guess her report was refuted by Bang Bros, who she may have been working for, who said that she made $178,000. But I mean, she maintained she only made $12,000, which is absolutely absurd. And she's also spoken about like really exploitative contracts and all of that kind of stuff, where like a lot of adult film stars feel like they're forced to sign kind of on the spot. A lot of that's awful and fascinating, but also like I feel like just to even tie that to video games, I have always been interested to
preemptively impressed with the connection you're about to make.
I've always been interested to see how successful VR porn can be, because in a lot of cases, the minute porn is successful on a platform, it can make the platform successful. They say that a big part of VHS taking off was porn being successful or accessible on VHS. So I've tried VR porn before. I did it at a CES and it was awful and uncomfortable and I really hated it. Like, extremely uncomfortable experience because there's no consent. So it's just POV watching something that looks like it's happening to you. And before they put it on me, they were like, just to let you know, most women really hate this. And so I tried it, took it off laughing within like 10 seconds.
A brilliant foundation for any
they were
product
like,
you're hoping to
just
sell.
to be
50%
aware,
of your day, it's hate
right
this.
now for women, it feels a bit rapey. And we recognize.
Well, yeah, because there is
we
no
need to fix
consent
that. No, so it's
right?
just a
It's
dude
video.
walking into a room and then just stuff happening and you can't move. And I'm like, what if I don't like this thing that looks like it's happening to me? Whereas, like, if you're watching a video, you just scrub through it. Very, very
If
uncomfortable.
there's one thing
Did not like
I
it.
want in that situation, it's to be completely blindfolded to my surroundings. Like that's
Yes.
the like, it doesn't seem like an activity you would want to do without peripheral vision in terms of viewing pornography. Like, it feels like you would want.
I think a lot of
to
people
know-
would disagree with you on
Just
that.
cut to Mike on a bus in the VR thing.
Well, I
But
just
he's
mean,
cut
like,
holes
you
in the
want-
sides of it so we can see.
But you want to know, right? You want to know, like, if someone
That
walks
is
into the room
that
or
is
whatever, right?
true. Yeah. I mean, I was
guess
doing
it's
it in a
get a
room
lot
full
of teenagers
of
in a
it's
lot
very-
of trouble. Is all.
Yeah,
is
it's
my
very
point.
catered to, like, non-roommate bachelors, I guess. I guess that's the primary market
or
for the
people
VR
at
porn.
CES. But yeah, it was atrocious, and I don't think I'd ever do it again unless they had like, not that I think I'd ever do it again anyway, but input, like choose your own adventure input, or like a stop button. Because he straight up said women all hate this. We're aware of it.
I love the
also-
idea
So
of
they've
them
improved since
gamifying the consent, where it's like a guy walks up to you
Yes,
and you're
no.
like,
Yeah.
no, and he just turns and leaves and that was your porn. And you're like,
I could get off to that, to saying no.
I mean, that would
and having them leave
There'd
and
be an
not be
audience
abusive.
specifically for that.
that's
I
too
think
good.
It's the dream.
Like, it's also a really weird set of technical challenges. I've never gone to that CES booth. I guess I was doing something else, but like
It was in the Cosmopolitan Hotel.
It seems
Really
It
was.
seems like, whereas it was in a hotel as well.
Yeah, it was in a-
It's cringy.
Yeah, and all the food was served by ex-porn stars who were about 60 years old and were willing to talk to you at any
No.
point. Like, they were like, just ask them about their experiences. It was like, I will take the
I'll
hummus.
say one thing,
I will not
though.
ask you about
I
your sex
don't-
life.
Yeah, no. But like, it's such a weird. Having no experience, I don't know, and I'm interested in your opinions on this. It seems like such a ridiculously hard hurdle to jump, in the sense that you have to make it immersive. Like, humans are always the hardest thing to show in an interactive context because your brain knows what it's like to lock eye contact with another human. I would have assumed like an intimate situation like that, it's going to be weird. Like even just like a scale discrepancy, like presumably like with video on VR, every VR video I've ever seen, I've either felt like I was 3 feet tall or 10 foot tall. You know what I mean?
Most
like,
men,
even something like
most men won't have a problem with a scale discrepancy in the context of wearing a VR.
Brilliant. Yeah, the scale
Solid.
was a massive
Solid.
problem. But I think that they've made... So I only tried it that one time. I've not revisited it. But, you know, it looked like you had a monster on top of you, even if I tried the one that was for the male perspective. It was all very heterosexual, so it was just like a giant, towering woman on top of you. That one did not make me uncomfortable in the same way, but it was, like, comical because the scale was such a big problem. But I believe that a lot of the companies working on the tech have improved that over time. It seems like
seems like an uncanny valley nightmare.
Really hard to do.
But I remember, related to this, I remember when Google Glass and some of the other peripherals were coming out offering AR type tech, you know, distinct from this. People were I remember reading an article, or maybe it was something on Twitter. I can't remember where I picked this up, so this could be something really random. But I remember somebody talking about it's effectively both people wearing these where their camera is being fed the perspective of the other. And I was like, why is that appealing? That's basically you looking at yourself, but for both of them.
Mirrors in hotel rooms are pretty popular, I understand.
Do you think that's what they're doing in Demolition Man? I always wondered what their weird VR sex is.
We just rewatched that the other day. Hilla had never seen that movie.
I watched it the first time the other day. That is a great movie.
It's excellent,
I don't know,
isn't it?
It is good. Yeah. It holds up.
It's so damn funny. And I love, and it was actually such a, like that scene in particular to watch in the context of a pandemic where she's like, fluid exchange?
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, that hurts. That's too real.
Yeah, how disgusted they are by... I was like, they actually did a lot of stuff pretty well in this movie. They predicted a lot of stuff.
It's so damn funny.
They talk about the big one in reference to an earthquake, and we had a really bad... Did it wake you, the earthquake, the other night, Austin?
You know, it's funny. I did... Nope, it did not. I would not have known. If it weren't for social media, I wouldn't have known it happened.
It was loud. Like, I've never, had earthquakes here plenty. Things shake a bit. That one was like...
Wasn't the epicenter like Inglewood or somewhere? Because that was...
It was out near the airport, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Because I think the valley was sequestered off from the impacts of that one. Because sometimes I definitely feel them. I had this period of time where I was so convinced that at every moment an earthquake would happen that I'd bump my own table, see like a glass move and think, oh, this was it. Because I just instantly would have the amnesia of my own body causing it and just look... This is the moment.
I think that earthquakes are happening quite frequently in LA. Like all the time I'll be like, something shook. Is that an earthquake? But it's not. It's just a thing living here and you get terrified of them. Anyway, to walk this backward, Demolition Man, good. Still not sure what their VR sex is. VR porn, hopefully successful because then in theory VR as a platform is more profitable and heads in a good direction. And I just I just published a video today, which will have been a few days ago, about some of my favorite VR games that I've been working out in. They are fantastic. So good at like... It's
really good for that.
Oh my God. Getting cardio in, like just getting your heart rate up and not realizing that you're doing it. Obviously your face gets sweaty and that sucks a bit, but it's such a good way to work out as someone who hates cardio because you just forget that you're actually working out in the real world rather than playing a video game. Such a fan, highly recommend, even to anyone who's like afraid to get into fitness. It makes you also a lot less self-conscious, I think, because you're just not thinking about what your body is doing or what you look like. Huge fan, highly recommend. I use the Oculus Quest 2. Walk back that to QA. I think is where we were.
Imagine being the QA department on the VR porn.
I was going to say the QA people listen to this podcast that are like, we've finally been heard. They have 20 minutes and then we're like, so VR porn, the Cosmopolitan at CES.
At least you've got your clickbait title for YouTube, right? Like at least you've got
That's true.
You've got options to choose from here.
I think I've told this story before here, but my favorite QA related story was on Alien Isolation, where they told me that they had developed their interactive music system to make these big nasty musical swells when the xenomorph was close by, and they discovered a bug or a QA reported a bug where, you'd hide in the locker and then the music would swell because of a false positive and the xenomorph wasn't there. And it made the game so much more terrifying because you weren't sure if it was there or not, that they just shipped it with the bug. They left it in because they thought it added so much to the gameplay. It was a happy accident that it didn't actually break the functionality of the game. It was just the music misfiring. And
that
I was
game
like, that's
is
awesome.
very scary up until the point that it's not. I had this problem where I stopped finding it scary the first time. It's probably halfway through that you see the xenomorph on a loop. You actually watch it in one of the rooms walk around in a circle. And the minute that happened, the minute I felt like it was on a track, and I understood what it was doing, I feel like it just was never terrifying again. I was more afraid of the...
It's a lot like VR pornography. Once the illusion is broken.
Exactly. And you don't have consent, and it's terrifying. You just want to throw it away.
Xenomorph did not respect consent.
That's
definitely...
Well, the flamethrower, it kept its distance if you held the flamethrower to it. That's a form of consent.
Yeah,
it was
something
like
staying away if you hold a flamethrower to it counts.
You all keep my distance if I'll be charred to a crisp in exchange.
I still maintain that game is too long, but it is very good.
Somehow I'm normally that guy, as someone who loves.
I think we've had this conversation before.
Yeah, I think
we
so.
definitely have. I can tell the loop. It's like seeing the alien loop around the room sometimes on this show. Yeah.
This conversation.
I don't know if we've spoken about VR porn before, but it is pretty fascinating tech.
I feel like that one's new territory. I'm really disappointed we can't have Troy's hot take.
I was just about to say we're maximizing all the things that
he
Troy's
is in every video game, isn't he? So.
And also, I have friends in comms.
It's true.
So. Full circle on all of it. But no, the people I know who work in QA, who have worked in QA, it's a very thankless job. Like I said earlier, in a lot of cases, contract. There are a lot of people who do QA in LA that basically jump between the studios as needed, and it sounds like some of those people are happy doing that and enjoy doing that. But in a lot of cases, it's very, especially publicly, thankless work. It's a lot of work. It's very, very, very important to the development of a video game. You need QA. And you'll get blamed if it's not perfect, even though that is not generally QA's fault. It is generally a scope fault. It's
never QA's fault. QA found the bug that you're experiencing, probably, and ultimately someone in my position went, it's super rare, won't be a problem.
Yeah,
that's how it always works out.
And you have to rank them, Mike. You should talk about the subjective appraisal of this is game breaking, therefore it cannot be allowed to stay in the game, versus this is, does this ruin ABC the game class, or not? Yeah.
It's basically what Austin just said. We have different grading systems, so an A-class bug is like, usually you have the concept of game breaking, so literally it breaks the game, crash, as a user would call it. You have progress blockers, so they're bugs that stop you from progressing any further, or often maybe tied to like a save game bug, but there's different gradations for that.
And then you have my favorite class of bug, which is no, seriously, we can't release a game with this ridiculous thing in it, which can wobble depending entirely on the creative director's kind of opinion. My Audacity has crashed for the second time on this call, so I'm going to reopen that.
Oh wow!
It's going to be a nightmare. I'm so sorry for the editor.
Jumping down and
apparently without Troy, we're just a bunch of misfits.
Apart.
Yep.
Do you have a backup audio, Alanah, for this?
Yeah, I have backup audio.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is bad. It doesn't ever sound good.
Hopefully this will load back up again before I continue.
It's just, I think isn't it Zoom capturing the compressed input that you're getting through the internet, basically?
I record through OBS, but that is the effect. So if the audio in this episode sounds bad,
I have most of it. Let me just, I'm going to start a new recording.
Audacity does do a good job of backup, generally. What were we talking about?
Yeah, well, I
was going to throw something in, actually.
While we're look at you, QA testing real time, sort of, for the podcast.
There we go. So one thing I wanted to just throw in, actually, because it is a bit of advice that still floats around the industry that I think is important, is what's happened with QA is traditionally decade or two ago, QA would be internal within a company, and they would generally be static. They wouldn't be hired and fired at quite the rate that you mentioned earlier, like people bouncing around. So the common advice was, hey, if you want to get into the games industry, go in through QA. I made a choice in terms of when I'm talking to students, I don't make that recommendation anymore. QA arguably isn't a great path into core game development. If you want to be on a development team doing design code, QA still developers, but if you want to be on the internal team making the game itself, I think we're at a stage now as an industry where there are better paths in, and there's a lot of people who get trapped in that loop, as you say, of kind of bouncing between. If you want to be a QA person, go and join a QA department. That's great.
I'm going to push back on the idea that the QA department is not making the game itself. I think they are.
That's a choice. That's a terminology thing. I mean, in terms of literally, if you want to be on the core development team doing design, code, art, someone basically, if you want to be sat, if when you're imagining your dream job in games, you're sat on an internal dev team at a company like Naughty Dog between the level designer and the coder, then
QA is generally quite separate
nowadays to get into that role.
Sure, yeah.
I'm not diminishing the role of QA. As I said at the start, I have an enormous amount of respect, and it's a vital part of the process. But it is not the gateway job it used to be, because those teams are now either geographically removed from the teams, or they are people on bad contracts, frankly, where they're constantly being fired and rehired. So if you want to work in QA, go work in QA. It's a cool job, and if you enjoy that kind of work, you're going to have a great time doing it. But I do think the advice of get your foot in the door via QA is a little out of date and a little out of touch.
I don't think I'd ever give anyone
and
that advice.
games companies. Say again, sorry.
I was going to say, I don't think I'd ever give anyone that advice unless they specifically wanted to do that thing.
Oh, I hear that still from people saying, hey, if you want to be a game designer, go and do QA. I think it's useful. I think the experience of doing QA is in itself useful for a designer, because it gets you into that analytical, logical thinking that is a big part of design thinking. But it used to be that you could go into a QA department and catch the attention of the designers and get promoted into the design department. That's much harder to do now because of the degrees of separation that exist between those disciplines. Sure. So it's not a value judgment, definitely not a value judgment. It's more about literal geography and how those teams fit in.
Be realistic with what people's goals are. That's not necessarily the right path to take. And I guess related to that, back to my original question, do you think that people trying to get into the games industry, where QA or not, particularly in the indie space, need to have a presence on Twitter? I think that's
I was desperately trying to remember the original question.
I don't think they do, and I think increasingly, I think maybe that's a bad idea.
It's part of what I was thinking. I feel like it might have scared people away this week, and that's kind of why I wanted to ask. But I've had people in the comments before ask us this question and ask if we wanted to talk about it. It's like, for games journalists, I would say yes, you need to be on Twitter. That is a big part. You need to be
building up those contacts and that
sharing
awareness.
Articles. Having people see the things that you've read. It acts as a digital portfolio that a lot of people will actually be able to see, rather than when it's on a blog or a website or whatever else. I think it's very, very important. And yeah, for context, of course, like, you need to be in touch with PR people. You need to be making contacts with developers. Definitely very, very important. In my job role now, I don't think that I actually need Twitter. I don't think, to be a video game writer, I don't think that I need to be on Twitter. But I do feel like it is still very helpful regardless to get into the industry, because dear God, the games industry is so very on Twitter. Like, so much news
online
is on a tweet. Like, it's very, very common. So it's definitely a part of it. But I don't know that I feel like it's necessary across the board. Austin, how do you feel about the idea of people in your vocation?
I get asked that by students and such all the time, and there are a couple of composers that have cultivated or just happened into, one way or the other, pretty robust online presences, and so there's a tendency or a temptation to look at that and sort of attribute their success to that, and or at least think of it as part of the variable of their success. And I generally think that that's probably not true. I think generally you get career opportunities because, one, people like working with you. You're easy to work with. You're reliable. You deliver on time. You know, you can keep your cool under pressure and stress and all that. And then obviously, if the quality of the music is at least good enough, and past that, everything else is basically bonus. You know, there are lots of composers who are, hyperactive on Twitter and have no career to show for it. And then there's others that are just working 24/7 and incredibly successful that have never even thought to make social media. In fact, some of the older guard, like Alan Silvestri and John Powell and Danny Elfman, you know, the composers that are kind of a generation or two older than mine, in the last, you know, year to 2 years have kind of decided to dip their toes in, and they have the most endearing and charming social media presence. Alan Silvestri in particular, because it's always like him with a glass of wine, like good evening or whatever. And it's like knowing that, you know, yesterday he scored like fucking the Avengers or whatever, but it's just, you know, he's just this incredibly congenial, wonderful man. And so yeah, I don't think it's necessary. It doesn't hurt. The one advice that I always give is do it if you think you can be yourself. Don't treat it as a marketing platform, because I always, anytime I follow someone and then I realize that all they use it for is to say, hey, check out this newest release of this and this, and it's not a dialogue platform. It's not a chance to interact with them, but it's just
that's
basically
why I have Mike muted.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. Understood. And
I don't want to wish list your games, Mike. You know, I don't want to do it.
You should wish list them. That's all I'm saying. You should wish list them. It's a simple message, and it comes from the heart. Wishlist my games.
Contradicting yourself from earlier in this episode.
Where you said don't buy any of your games.
I know.
It's like he can't be himself.
I'm annoyed that neither of you got that reference. I hope the comments do.
Why, that you just made a reference that I didn't understand?
I did to a brilliant work of art. It's fine. It doesn't matter.
Well,
the greatest song ever written, I think, actually. It doesn't matter.
Somewhere Over the Rainbow?
That's a pretty good song.
Well, now it's more of a big deal that we didn't get the reference because we've drawn attention to it, and now I'm insecure.
It's been weird. Now it's become weird.
I really
the best way to avoid. Now I've drawn you in.
Am I going to get cancelled on Twitter because I don't know the reference?
You should wish list my game. That's the lesson now. So what this is actually an excellent demonstration of.
Wish list my game is like Cardi B's newest single, and we just don't know it.
That's true. That's what it is. We're not all as up to date as Mike.
This whole thing. I'm an actor. This has been one big build up to that release. The record's dropping.
Hell of a coup.
I don't know about Twitter. I really don't. I have a kind of a definite kind of Faustian pact with Twitter, because I definitely wouldn't have the career I have if I hadn't been like an early Twitter person. But at the same time, like, it's such a source of stress and frustration and anxiety for me. I don't know. If I could, I'd walk away tomorrow, but I think I kind of still need it a little bit to promote stuff. That said, most people at the start of their careers are not actually responsible for promoting games. So I think you can probably keep your head down.
And probably don't also have the same level of stress that someone like you might have. Twitter is stressful regardless just because of what you intake, but it's also what people throw at you is disproportionately higher the longer you're on it. Really.
That's true. I'm lucky in that extent that people are generally pretty cool to me on there, but still, yeah, of course. Yeah, I don't know. I think as well, it can be a very perilous position for a younger dev. Like, something we're very conscious of as a company, that if we release a game and someone doesn't like it, there's a non-zero chance that people are going to find out the one woman who was related to a feature they didn't like of the team, and they're going to go after that person on social media. There's definitely like an exposure for young devs there, and you see it time and again, right? Like, a game's being unpopular, the worst parts of the internet are going to find out the three women who were in that team or in that area or whatever, and they're going to lay into them.
It happened really badly with Mass Effect Andromeda. They were very specific about who they targeted to blame for that game. It was pretty awful to watch.
And the reality is, with a AAA game, the person you're angry at does not have a Twitter. That person is nowhere near. They're off with their
$1 million bonus. They're doing fine.
They can't get to their laptop for the piles of cash. So, like, yeah, it's always disheartening to see. So it's definitely something that, like, for younger devs, there is a risk that you become the center of a storm that you really, really, really didn't, deserve.
I think I've also seen people. I've also seen people, particularly on the journalism side, but there was definitely one instance of someone who was in development / programming, sort of hurt their careers by the way that they conducted themselves on Twitter. To Austin's point about like people getting hired because they're easy to work with. If you come across as though you are not on Twitter, that can hurt your hireability. And I think the problem with younger people using it and not knowing that is that they shoot themselves in the foot where career opportunities are concerned way too early. And the way that I think I've seen that, the most common way I've seen it, particularly with people looking to get into journalism, was people acting like they knew more than everyone else. On Twitter, replying to every game dev, replying to every other journalist, telling them they're wrong and that they know more was something that's like, nobody is going to work with you. But I think when you're young and you do think you know everything, you also don't know well enough that makes you seem like a douchebag and not well informed. It doesn't make people want to work with
some
you.
Some of the worst stuff I've been sent on Twitter, or the most, not worst as in awful, but just like rude, just like insulting on a personal level or whatever, has been from someone who, when I've clicked on them, their profile says aspiring game developer.
Yeah, or student.
And it's like, I'm not a quote tweet guy. Like, it's not my vibe. I don't do that. It doesn't suit my style on Twitter. But at the same time, like, you just try to wind up someone who has a voice in the games industry. What are you doing? Like, why are you picking this fight?
It's a lesson you can learn too late. Weird. Sort of the point there is, like, some people don't. You shouldn't be saying the things.
Some
you're
people
saying.
will quote tweet you, and you will become the protagonist of Twitter for the day.
I think the other two really naive beliefs on behalf of the person, because I've seen younger composers do the exact same thing you're talking about, and I think that the double whammy of naive beliefs that they've internalized that gave them permission to do that beyond just general obliviousness or arrogance is they look and they, like, especially if they're brand new, they're still a student, or they're just new to the business in one way or another. They'll look and they'll say, okay, well, I have 100 followers and I'm talking to people that have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers. So they think they're very anonymous and they think that they're sort of lost in the crowd, and that somehow translates into it not counting. And I think they also simultaneously, the other part of the double whammy is that they overestimate how big the industry is, and they don't realize, especially when you boil it down to the development community, the games journalist community, the games writer community, all these subsets. You know, I rarely meet a composer that I've just genuinely never heard of. Like, it's really, after a few years in the business, you realize it's a small community. So when you're one of those people, like, there are a couple composers I know that they don't realize the damage they've already done to their career, because everyone I know has talked about this person because of that cavalier tweet or that douchey Facebook post or something, and they think that no one notices. And then meanwhile, here's 10 composers working on 30 different games that you've all heard of, and they all know who this person is because a screenshot of that got shared around. Is like, can you believe what this person said? And they think it's a larger community than it is. And it's a shame because, I've had a few instances of where someone sent me, a direct message along, that was in that vein, of like, here's, everything that you don't know or that you're doing wrong or whatever. And I've written back to them and I've tried to very kindly say, look, I'm a very non-vindictive person. I am not the type of person to screenshot this shit and share it around or whatever. And so please take it as like a shot across the bow that I'm explaining to you the massive error you're making. Yeah. And as a teachable moment, because I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire over this, but very few other people will have this attitude. Like, people will just laugh and screenshot it, and my foot slipped.
It's kind of like a
protagonist of Twitter, right? Yeah. He can't help but create music,
so
even
musical.
in a moment of accident. It just arrives. It was John Williams, I think, that said, no, it sounds, the way Austin's saying it, there's a risk that to someone it sounds like kind of a grand conspiracy, that there's a list somewhere. If there is, I'm
no, certainly not
know about it.
People just
but it's
talk.
more just people are people. Like, you'll never believe the dumb shit someone said to me today. Like, they'll, in the same way as anyone talks with their friends, I think what people sometimes underestimate is the games industry is like a very small group of people. And reputation matters a lot. Like, I care a lot about my reputation.
It's not a hyperactively catty, gossipy, mean girlsy kind of environment. It is just literally humans being humans. And it usually starts in an innocuous way, like person A, the young, oblivious, doesn't realize they're making a horrible mistake or doesn't care, but most likely just don't realize they are doing something very ill-advised, says something to person B, and then person B turns to person C and says, how should I respond to this? And then person C is the one that's like the little gossip that says, did you see what person A did or whatever? So it's like, so it's not even.
And we all have a friend who's person C, right? Like we may
I
not
totally
be person
do.
C
My brain
ourselves,
went, I know who
but
my
we
person
all-
C is.
No, I visualize that person in my mind immediately, and it's a person who I specifically won't mention, like a funny interaction like this, because I know it will just spread and like destroy
If
someone.
I tell my
'Cause this one
person C
gossip-
something, they
Yeah.
will look through someone's Twitter timeline for 4 days straight and tell me all the shit that I'm like, I just mentioned one tweet.
So
This
the
didn't
title
need
of
to
today's
happen.
episode is "Don't be the person
Don't
C."
be person
Don't be person C.
Yeah.
Don't be person C.
I can stand by that message.
Yeah, I do think it's a hard thing because you don't know the lesson until you've learned it when you become Twitter's antagonist for the day. So that's definitely a big thing. I have seen people routinely, again, usually with arrogance, hurt their careers in games journalism. However, I do think it is important for that field for you to be on Twitter. I do think it is the best way, especially because, you know, that the way that works for most people, the way it worked for me is to go from freelancing to part-time to full-time is generally the roadmap. And the best way to get freelance work is to be actively on Twitter where people are advertising, needing freelance writers, making those contacts with editors, etc. I think it is very, very important. But you can also do more harm than good, as is social media in a nutshell, really. And it's obviously helped my career tremendously in a lot of different ways, while also, you know, deteriorating my mental health in a bunch of ways. So there's a balance across the board for all of it that is worth looking at. And
Here's a question
Everything kills
for you.
the shit out of you, doesn't it? Yeah.
Because I've definitely had those days where I'm like, maybe I'm just going to shut down all of my accounts and just completely go off the... Like, I've definitely had, I think, of my version, at least, of what you're describing. But here's my question for the two of you. Do you find that it's... the drag force of it is primarily the result of what people are saying directly to you in response to your own tweets? Or is it just from looking at your timeline of, like, doom scrolling and that kind of thing?
It's
Of
a
what
timeline.
other...
Yeah, it's that.
I have my
Same.
notifications off, so I only see things that people I follow say to me on Twitter at this point. I don't see anything anyone else says to me, so that means absolutely nothing to me. The things people say to me are fine. It is the constant needing to know every negative thing all the time that just makes me go, fucking hell. But I also sometimes struggle with feeling like I'm a person who tries to do a lot of good, and any time that I make a mistake, people are so obsessed with the mistake that it feels like people don't want me to be good. It's like I'm trying so hard to stick to this thing, and you keep trying to make something bad, and I'm just trying to do the right thing all the time, and I really am. And I feel like I struggle with that a lot on social media as well. It's like the good's just never good enough and the bad is the worst, and sometimes it's like this pressure of, it just gets very frustrating of like trying to do something good in a world that wants you to fail. Like anytime that I announce a new charity campaign, basically there will be someone being like, oh, how much money does she make from this? It's zero, but there's conspiracy theories. I can't even accept the money legally. Or like,
is it something that
virtue signaling, just like all this shit that comes up when I'm just like, just trying to do something good. Stop.
Is it one of the... Because I'm curious if those voices are the unignorable, vanishingly small minority, or if it actually... Because for me, that's always the case. One person will write something shitty, and it immediately... I can't see the 99 positives anymore, because it's just... I think it's just human nature. Is that...
You're not designed to. You're biologically not designed to be able to process people's opinions of you. Like, we are all... we're all like meant to live in little villages. Like, we're not
supposed to have thousands of people talk to us every day.
I'm not meant to know that 70,000 people will hear something I say on the internet. That is terrible. That is an awful that message. It's an empathy.
Well, in fairness, you've had bad audio
if you're
this
an
whole
empathetic
time.
person,
So.
it's a nightmare. Say again.
Your audio has been terrible.
How many
this
people
whole
are listening
time.
to this?
You've saved yourself. No, I don't think any one
Have I been supposed to be recording this whole time?
I thought we were friends. We were hanging out. No. Oh.
I don't think any one comment ever
Feel
bothers
used.
me or spirals me. Mine is, it's a pressure thing of like an amount of them. I don't think I ever read one comment and go, today's burned to the ground. It's only ever a volume rather than an individual comment that gets to me sometimes. And the only time that it does put pressure on me is when I'm trying to do the right thing and I feel like the world doesn't want me to do the right thing. That is
You could consider just
pressure issue.
not doing the right thing.
I'm driven to, you know? I very compulsively want to, and my idea of the right thing might not be the objectively right thing. I could be wrong all the time, but I try very hard to do the right thing.
No, but I'm saying just throw the supervillain thing on for
I don't
for a
want to,
change of
Austin,
pace.
and I feel like the world wants me to, and I don't want to do it.
Give the people
I don't
what they
wanna
want,
do it.
Alanah.
I don't want
I
to.
think the heartbreaking
just become
aspect
a
of this
horrible
for
monster.
I'm
me,
just trying to be nice.
I think that the horrible thing here is in that scenario where Alanah's trying to do a nice thing and someone's kind of laying into her for a conspiracy theory or a detail or whatever.
It's always Austin. Yeah.
It's always Austin.
I'm still not convinced of the games writer thing.
Yes. Both those people.
That was very satisfying, Mike. Thank you.
Both those people are being manipulated by software to bash into each other, and that's the aspect I find heartbreaking. That your day is worse because of, like you said, a compound element of those interactions. Your day's worse because of that. Their day's worse because of it, because they've been shown your tweet has been shown to that person because on some level, not intelligently. It doesn't know they're like, it's not intelligent, it's really stupid, but it's just stupid enough that it can achieve an outcome that's negatively damaging both of you. And that's the bit that I find heartbreaking. That's something I try and remind myself in those moments is this person probably would like open a door for me in real life. Like this, we're not meant to be against each other. There are truly awful people and there's no common ground with them. But most of those interactions that are like awkward or like, I think probably you weren't trying to be a jerk, but you were, and those kind of compounding. That's just a machine making our days worse to make us keep coming back and trying to hunt that endorphin rush. It's a real thing on YouTube. Like I feel like I've really cut my social media usage back. I do not spend very much time on Twitter anymore, and most of the bad news that I hear about is through other people telling me about what they read on Twitter rather than seeing it myself. And sometimes I'm conflicted. Like I don't know where I land on the idea that I am ignorant about things. Like I didn't know about major news that happened yesterday until someone told me, and it was like, well, shit, I probably should have known about this. But I won't know if I'm not looking at Twitter because I don't, watch any TV or anything. Although, I'm still not sure how I feel about that morally.
It begs the question of, are you in a position to do something about it where you knowing a day later made an impact that you have a hard time stomaching? Because I do think that used to be the next morning's paper or maybe the evening news was how like the whole world found out about things. And generally the world functioned well, ever improving.
There were some criticisms, I think. There were some problems. I think in the past
I'm
there were
not saying the world was perfect and we've backslid, but I do think that because I've gone through exactly what you're talking about, Alanah, where I'll like I have a friend where we'll share, like if you see a headline or something that's particularly nauseating or something, like we got into this pattern of sharing those back and forth, be like, can you believe this shit? And then at some point, I think he matured faster than me because I would share like some horrible hot take from someone on Twitter or something. And he'd go, why are you still following that person? And he was like, I felt judged that I thought, oh, you're right. I could have opted out of this bullshit. Why am I subjecting myself to it?
I have a thing with a couple of friends where at this point I have to be like, why are you telling me this? I wouldn't have known about this trash if you didn't I didn't need to know this. My day would have been great without this. I didn't need to know. But then some of it, I don't know. I just feel like it's a privilege. I feel like it's a thing that I should be aware of, is that there are a lot of people, especially in like the content creation space, who do need to constantly be on Twitter to network, to grow the people they're streaming with, to have access to all these things that I can just conveniently like piece out of. And
but I don't see a problem, even if that is explicitly privilege, as you are labeling it. You've earned that, haven't you? I mean, like to me, that isn't. You've not. It's not like you have a moral obligation. It from my perspective, I don't see the argument for that. There could be one, but I don't see it.
I don't necessarily, in some cases, I'm not going to say explicitly, yes, I earned it, when, most of the people that I'm referring to are people of color, so it's not like I earned it. But, I have been working in the field for 10 years and it spent a very long time working for major outlets to build an audience, so it didn't happen overnight. It took a really long time.
That's all I'm referring to, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But again, like I just feel like I don't know the answer to it yet. I don't know how I feel about what I'm currently doing, which is I tweet something and then I just leave. And the only time where I will really look at my feed is bathroom. So I'm frequently tweeting while peeing, just so you're aware. Or in a lunch break, or if I don't have anything else to do.
That makes it worse when you tweet us now. Mm-hmm. Please stop DMing us then. That's not good.
Yes, it's true. I've exposed myself. No. It's very true.
So you've ruined the whole
Sometimes
thing
if I can't fall asleep, but like, I'm very much doing what I would consider like a swoop and poop. I just like sort of post a tweet and then peace out like a bird. Just shit it out and then I leave and I forget that I even said it.
Mid-flight.
Pretty much,
We've
yeah.
really hit all of the bodily functions on this episode,
did.
haven't we? I think it's good. It's good.
We've
It's
crossed
truly
the board.
scatological play, watch, listen.
I will say, just like across the board, I've watched a lot of people get very addicted to social media, and you got to recognize how much of it is negative. I'm not going to rule out the importance of it. I'm not going to say it didn't help my career, because it absolutely did, especially, again, journalism, very important. But man, we be using it too much, and I think sometimes forgetting that Twitter is not real life. Not everyone in the real world is going to yell at you for everything. They are different things, even if I think they have more of an influence than probably the laws are willing to admit at this point. We probably don't have enough accountability for what they can impact, but
I will just add one little final comment onto that, which is I do think that the one sort of consistent saving grace it has is that if you resist your own primal instinct towards that negativity, you'll tend to get a lot less of it back. And I use my friends Brian and Amelia as a good example. The actors from Detroit Become Human who started streaming on Twitch a lot, they're like the most ultra positive, upbeat, let's all be nice to each other, and they're very single-minded. Like they don't scrub out the human aspect of like some days are good and bad and that kind of thing, but they're very conscientious about putting positive vibes out there. And the result is that when you scrub through their replies on Twitter or their comment thread on Twitch and whatnot, they've attracted an audience that is exactly the same way. And it's like, and I remember I asked him once, you've got such a wonderful community, and he said, it's just because that's what we put out there. There's no secret to it, So if you resist your own desire to be like, what the fuck is this about something, you'll tend to get less. It's not a 1-to-1. This isn't a secret bullet. I'm not trying to over smooth. Like I'm not trying to cast an overly simplistic view of it, but I just think, they're a good testament to kind of garbage in, garbage out as a way to look at these things.
it also helps you reframe it.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say I found Kind of Funny stuff. Second mention of Kind of Funny in this episode, kind of interesting on this, because Kind of Funny had that approach and that attitude for quite some time. Like, and they were very much like we're a positive place on the internet. Like we want good vibes only. And it was interesting last year. I think like a lot of people, they were reappraising that, with the Black Lives Matter movement and the moment that we were in, where we were all looking at all of these things. And I actually kind of liked where they I think Greg kind of publicly said, like, look, that's not good enough anymore ultimately, and they had allowed some elements of this horrible stuff to exist in their community because it's ignore the comments, that kind of attitude of like, we don't need to worry about this, and they had fostered some negativity. So I think that to me is like the god tier next level of what you're describing, is kind of positivity but with rules, with kind of, or not necessarily rules, but with boundaries, where you can you build a positive community, but you also, when you have to step in, you step in. And I think that's something I've seen the switch in the way Kind of Funny handles their community. And I think it's generally a positive thing. Like, I think that it seems to have made their content better. There's a lot more diverse voices on their network. There's a lot more people in their community than there were. Like, it feels like there's some lessons learned there, which I thought was interesting, and is basically just building on what you were saying, Austin. That's like, I feel like that's the next level that you get to after positivity, establishing those rules and those boundaries. I think that's true of life as well, right? We all do that. We all go through the stage where we want everyone to like us, and then we start to get picky about our friends later in life, and we go, okay, let's put some boundaries up.
I think Kind of Funny are also in a position that a lot of people aren't, though, where they make most of their money from ads and Patreon, not from like a YouTube view or a Twitch subscription, which means that they are allowed to do those things. It is a little bit different for them. Like, I don't think I could make a Patreon ever again, because some of the most serious stalker issues I had came from Patreon, where I was still just posting gaming content. But I would not feel comfortable doing what Kind of Funny does, where they get to have video calls or send postcards ever again in my life. There's no way I will let people have that.
Because it creates that artificial intimacy with the audience.
Two of them that like had to end up being police reports, one currently ongoing, came from Patreon, just because it was people feeling like they had a little bit more access to me. I will never comfortably be able to do that again. They can do that. And that's great for them. And means that they can, be a little stricter about what they take and what they don't take in terms of audience, and also even the time that they put into moderating their stuff. So I agree with that, and I've definitely appreciated their approach to being like, hey, we don't want some of you here, but I don't think everyone can do that either. I will say to the positivity comment, every stream I do is for charity, and I think having that is like to just completely own the selfish nature of it, such a positive feeling for me too. So making that choice to use the internet to try to do something positive.
You have to hate
how
it.
much of a cut am I taking? None, damn it.
But if you're not taking a cut, you better at least be miserable. Otherwise, it's not truly selfless. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a good point. But that's the thing where like I'm doing this thing that then I see people raise a bunch of money and then I get to have the experience of, holy shit, look what you people did. That's just this constant loop of actively having this positive feedback and of being amazed every single time that a charity goal is hit. And that's something that I am making the choice to positively participate in, that it would be very easy to just not do. So there are definitely choices you can make on social media to make things more positive, and including how you engage with people. Like since changing my tweet notifications to just followers, sometimes I do miss when I'd have someone who was following me make a really good joke. Like, is one of my favorites if there's a tweet chain of people I don't know, like 4 in a row, making really good jokes. And I'm like, this is very good content. And I don't know them. Like, I love that stuff, and I'm kind of missing that. But for the most part, there's just so much on that app that like, I don't fucking want to see it. But I do want to acknowledge a lot of people probably should be, you do need to use it for your careers, but there are limits to that, and you got to be careful with it, etc. But I feel like we didn't really have a hard answer. Like, mine for journalism is a hard yes. You guys were like kind of maybe. In some cases, yes, but not entirely necessary, I feel like was where we landed on that.
I think it's one tool in the toolbox. I've definitely hired people from Twitter, but I've also hired people from ArtStation or people from a lot of recommendations and, you know, that kind of thing. I think a big part of, a big side effect of the way everyone is connected is that I think people think the way into the games industry is to, like, become friends with a famous game developer, and actually I think often it's about community forming more locally. Like, basically, like, you don't need to become a star on social media. You can just be someone who knows people in their, you know, in their local scene.
Good reputation locally.
Is very true. Yeah, you don't need to there's, you know, someone I was in the process of trying to hire, didn't work out in the end, unfortunately. Recently was someone who has not got a massive social media presence, but was just someone who I kept hearing their name from everyone who'd worked with them. Like, this is just a really cool person to work with. And that's, you know, that's how it got to me. That's that reputation. It's the positive side of what Austin was talking about earlier. That kind of people are still people, and working with people and getting a sense of community in that way does work and does find a way in. I think it's one tool. I think if you're someone who is drawn to it and it works for you, great. Don't post stupid stuff on an account that you're trying to use to get a job. But other than that, sure.
I feel like that's a good
But that goes, I've had portfolios sent to me where, like, it's not just a Twitter thing. Like, I've had show reels. I literally had a show reel sent to me once, which featured like a pornographic scene. I'm like, what job do you think this is going to get you? Like, where? I mean, I guess we gave you a specific job.
It ended up landing this actor the role of Hex. I imagine. We all knew it was coming. That was the name of the movie, I think, that he was. They had used a clip from.
Oh, Troy.
Yeah,
we miss him. We miss him.
My answer is basically the same. You know, all I was sort of getting at before is if I look at somebody's Twitter feed and I feel like it's a marketing stream, I'm very uninterested. Yeah. But if I feel like it's a way to genuinely get to know them because they find their voice in tweet form, then it's, you know, then it's enjoyable. Like the two of you, that's something that both of you have in common is like I don't feel like I'm having a wildly different interaction with you now than if we were tweeting back and forth about something, because you have found a translation to your honest self in that medium. And so when I say to folks, if you think that this needs to be important, just ask yourself if you can be honestly yourself, not misrepresent yourself, and how you would treat other people and how you would represent your ideas and your enthusiasms about this and that and the rest, and your tactfulness about this or that. And if it just feels like it's just I'm hawking my wares, you know, then it's probably going to be a lot less interesting.
Yeah.
it's the hawking the wares has become ridiculous with artists with this NFT nonsense. Like the number of concept artists I follow who now have just turned their entire Twitter into NFT stuff.
Really?
It's
Yeah, me too.
heartbreaking,
Yeah, it's a lot. Some of it's very cool. But like you say, it's heartbreaking.
The art's great. The tech bros using the art community to shepherd their nonsense currency into mainstream articles. Not so
Funny,
cool.
I've seen zero. I saw a few articles when the first kind of initial wave of excitement happened about maybe this will be a gateway for musicians to finally have a really profitable, like, because I saw there was a band.
Have many musicians done stuff with it? Have there been?
I don't know of any. I saw there was one band that it was a pretty big band. I'm blanking on who it was, but it's a relatively big group that decided they were going to use NFTs as the exclusive way of releasing their next album as an experiment. And there was a write-up about it saying, you know, in the post-streaming world, the music industry has been looking around for what is going to be our solution to figuring out a way to try to reclaim some of our prior numbers. And they said, maybe this is it. And I thought, interesting, maybe it is. That was about as far as I got with it.
That's the heartbreaking aspect, is I don't begrudge any artist for getting paid. Like, that's a good thing. Like, I'm pro artists getting paid. I just wish it wasn't such a horrible kind of industry that's
you think
that's,
it's in an
that's
exploitative
behind
way. I do
Yeah.
not know enough about it. I'd be down to have an episode where we talk about it, but I feel like I would need to go and research because I've really not looked into NFTs.
I've had a tab open on my screen for about a month called NFTs Explained from like NPR.
Well, let's
or
try
something.
and do it. Let's try and make that happen. Which means it's literally
just a
never going to
receipt.
happen. If you ever say,
Just
let's
a
do
receipt.
this,
Yeah, this is our
then
topic.
this podcast will not ever
The
do this.
Heisenberg uncertainty principle of play, watch, listen means that all
Say it's gonna
aims
happen.
at a topic.
What we'll do is we'll
year
make
later.
a non-fungible token for this episode that we're going to do. And
Hell yeah.
because we've done that, it
See,
will
now I don't know what
exist
the
and
fuck
will
you're
have
talking about
value.
because I.
You've lost us. No, it's over our heads. Just a
I've
receipt,
already-
he
oh,
says.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Anyway, we really appreciate everyone who works in QA. You're all underrated. Thank you for your work. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.